Edo Arctic 2, Polar Research for Education, innovative program in Poland and Norway. Webinars.
My name is Daniel Kemski and I work in Institute of Geophysics, Polish Academy of Sciences. And today I will tell you something about air pollution in polar regions. I work in atmospheric physics department, so let's say that's my interest, air pollution in polar regions. And maybe on the beginning, I will tell you what is air pollution. Yes, so let's start with definition. And in case of air pollution, there is no one clear definition. So that the one that I like is that air pollution is all contamination of air by substances that are harmful for health or dangerous from different reasons. And just for a remind, that's how look like our atmosphere. So it's mostly nitrogen and oxygen, some argon, some carbon dioxide, and there is a very tiny amount of many other elements. And this is our pollution. Yes, so today we will talk about this small amount that is harmful for our organisms, and not only our organisms, not only for humans, but also for plants and animals. So maybe we should tell something about sources of air pollution in polar regions. It's worth to remember that not only human activity is the problem, and not only human activity creates the pollution, but in polar regions also very important are natural sources, and especially forest and tundra fires. Yes, so probably you can hear some information in news that there are huge forest fires in Siberia or somewhere in Alaska. So this is one of the major sources of pollution in polar regions. And obviously we have also other natural sources like volcano eruptions. So volcanoes are present everywhere in the world, not only in some Mediterranean area, but also in polar zones. And they obviously influence the atmosphere there. It's worth to remember that we have something like emission of pollutants from plants, and obviously in polar regions they are not very, let's say, impressive, such emissions. But it's worth to remember that plants also emit some substances that can be treated like pollutants. And not many people know that in polar regions we have quite a lot of thunderstorms, and thunderstorms itself create some toxic cases. So, for example, if lightning strikes, we have some emissions of nitrogen dioxide, we have some emissions of ozone, and they can be harmful. But in polar regions, they are much more important as a ignition, as they ignite forests and tundra. Yeah, so the major source of pollutants in the polar regions are forest fires, and they are caused mostly by the lightnings, as there is no no such high polar human activity there. And it's also worth to remember about the permafrost thawing. That is very important natural source of air pollution emissions. So I will tell you about some more about that, but a little bit later. And in case of anthropogenic sources, you should remember that there is quite large emission from transport, and we in polar regions there are some cities. So as we have cities, there are some cars, some snowmobiles. Snowmobiles can emit pretty much toxic substances, maybe even more than cars. We have some, of course, aircraft traffic, but in the polar regions, the most important are ships in terms of pollutants. So you should remember that big ships are really huge problem to the atmosphere, to the air pollution, because one large ship container can emit the same amount of sulfur dioxide that, like the 50 millions of diesel cars. So ships are really big problem, and if they are present in the Arctic, they can be the major source of pollutants. And there is also a problem with storage and combustion of waste. So if we have isolated cities somewhere in the Arctic, the transport of the waste and the transport of garbage from such isolated cities is extremely expensive, to the other latitudes. So the garbage is often stored somewhere in the place where they are created, so in this isolated cities, and they are often combusted on the place, so it's not very healthy for the atmosphere, as you can imagine. And obviously in the Arctic we have quite a lot of precious minerals that are useful for humans. So we have the heavy industry present there, coal mines, gas, let's say that there is a lot of rare minerals that are used in polar. They are created in polar regions, let's say. And there is also the military activity. So military activity also produce the pollution, and I will tell you a little bit more about later in my presentation. So we know something about the sources of pollutants. So let's say know a little bit more about major pollutants that are present in polar regions, and not only in polar regions, obviously. So maybe we should start with sulfur dioxide. This pollutant is released during combustion of fossil fuels or naturally during volcano eruptions, for example. And this is the pollutant that is responsible for acid rains. So here we have pictures from the not polar regions, but from our latitudes, from let's say mid latitudes. So acid rains damage buildings, damage forests, and maybe it's hard to find picture that show acid rain in polar regions. How to present that. But you have to believe me that the acid rainfalls, or maybe more acid snowfalls, are a really huge problem in the polar areas. And other pollutant is nitrogen dioxide. And here the transportation is the main source, and it's naturally created during thunderstorms. And we have thunderstorms in the polar areas, but not so many. So here the more problematic is transportation. And in polar zones, let's say that this is not a very big problem. But if we have some large ships that comes to the Arctic, for example, with tourists or just passing by, they can emit huge amounts of nitrogen dioxide, and that can be problematic. And nitrogen dioxide, similarly as sulfur dioxide, is responsible for acid rains. And nitrogen dioxide can be easily visible in the atmosphere, because if we have such brown cloud over a city, for example here, we can be sure that this air is polluted by nitrogen dioxide. That is, the brownish color comes from the nitrogen elements. And going further, we have particulate matter, and you can often let's say hear here in let's say in TV or some internet sources. You probably know the term PM10 and what exactly means PM10. So that PM10 are small solid particles or liquid droplets that have a size smaller than 10 micrometers. Yeah. So PM10 it's all solid particles or liquid droplets that are smaller than 10 micrometers. Yeah. And you should remember that the finer the dust is, the more harmful it is. Yes. So if we have PM10, PM10 is less harmful than, for example, PM1. Yeah, so PM1 is the same like PM10, but the particle sizes are smaller than 1 micrometer. And for example, particulate matter can be almost anything. It can be ash, it can be soot, it can be soil or desert dust. It can be also sea aerosol, and obviously sea aerosol is not so not as harmful as, for example, soot. Yeah, so it's also important what this particulate matter is in fact. And here we have comparison on this image, how small are PM10 particles in comparison to human hair. And here you have also PM 2.5, and they are obviously much smaller than PM10. So this is how small they are. And here's also the image that show how deep can this particulate matter go into our organism, into our respiratory system. So in PM10 case, they these pollutants are blocked in our upper respiratory system, and if we have smaller particles like PM1, they can go into our lungs, and in case of very small particles PM 0.1, they can even go into our blood. So obviously, such finer particles are more harmful because they are going in more deeper inside our body. And important pollutant is also carbon monoxide. It's a product of incomplete biomass or coal combustion. And the main source of carbon monoxide are wildfires or domestic stoves. So let's say carbon monoxide can be transported with air on many distances, but obviously in polar regions more important are local sources like wildfires. Yeah, so wildfires are major source of carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide is very toxic. Maybe you heard about every winter during in mid latitudes we have a lot of injured people, dead people due to the intoxication of carbon monoxide. So this is really harmful air pollutant. And the problematic is also black carbon. And black carbon, similarly like carbon monoxide, is a product of incomplete biomass or coal combustion. And the difference is that carbon monoxide is the gas, and here black carbon is a solid form. Yes, it's a soot, very small particles of soot in solid form. And why they are problematic? Obviously, if you breathe the air with soot, it's not very healthy for you. But here in the Arctic, it's the more problematic is the accelerating melting of ice and snow when this soot, when this black carbon is deposited on the ground, or more not exactly ground, but glacier surfaces, sea ice surface, snow surface, or something like that. So here we have a picture that presents some glacier in the Arctic. And you probably know that glaciers should be white, yeah. And here, in that case, we have almost completely black surface of ice, and that's because of the soot. Yeah, it's deposited on the glacier surface and make it grayish or even black. somewhere here, yeah. And obviously, if you have white surface, it reflects a lot of sunlight, and if we have black surface, it absorbs a lot of energy. Similarly, if you have a t-shirt with black color on sunny day, you will feel hot, yeah. And in white t-shirt, you will probably feel comfortable. So similarly, this with glaciers. If the glacier is black, it will melt much faster than normal white glacier. So it's a big problem in polar areas. And carbon dioxide. So we probably all hear about carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is a product of complete hydrocarbon combustion. And in fact, it's something that we want. Yeah. So if we burn coal, we want to have carbon dioxide. It's not toxic. It's non-toxic, and even for plants, it can be treated like food. Yeah, so it's really important for the plant development. But right now it's treated like a pollutant because it's a greenhouse gas that is responsible for climate warming. Yeah. So even if it's not non-toxic and it's not harmful for organisms, it's a big problem in the Arctic, especially because more carbon dioxide creates greater temperatures. You probably know that effect, yeah, the climate warming effect. So if we have more and more carbon dioxide in our atmospheres, yeah, and our atmosphere, glacier melts and it changed the environment, living environment of animals in the Arctic. And here we have, for example, the sea ice extent in recent years, and obviously this sea ice extent is is dropping down. So this is for example, problem for polar bears that need sea ice to hunt on seals, yeah. And other greenhouse gas is methane, and this is dozens of times stronger than carbon dioxide, and is naturally released from wetlands, rice fields, or from melting permafrost. And this melting permafrost is pretty problematic in the Arctic because if we have higher temperatures, the permafrost is thawing faster and release more methane. So if we have more methane, then the process going faster and faster. So it's a the loop that is going faster and faster. And methane sources are stomachs of ruminants, for example. So also it's not only naturally produced, but it's also, let's say, partly due to the human activity, because we eat meat. Yes, we, let's say, produce a lot of meat out of cows, and these cows emit methane, so it's a problem. And not only naturally emitted gas. Yeah, and as you can see, all animals emit methane, but in case of human, it's not a very big amount, but one cow emits 120 kilograms per year. So this is, if we have a lot of cows, this methane gas can be problematic for the atmosphere. Yeah, okay. Other problems, other pollutants are persistent organic pollutants, so-called POPs, and here we have a lot of substances. They are various organic chemical substances that tend to accumulate and stay in the environment for a long time, and they have an ability to accumulate in the fatty tissues of living organisms. So this is a problem, especially for apex predators. And in 50s, in 60s, we have a very popular substance, DDT, that was used as insecticide. and it was advertised as a completely harmless for humans, for any living organism, only killed, mosquitoes or something like that. But for humans was completely healthy, they believe so. And they were advertisements that people stand in cloud of this DDT and they were completely healthy. Yeah, no, not they didn't feel any damage to health. And that was true if you stay in such cloud for short period of time. But it turned out that this DDT is accumulates in the environment, and this is the problem, especially for these higher apex predators. So if we have, for example, some fishes, they have small amount of these pops of, let's say, for example, DDT. But if the seal eat this DDT, they accumulate in their organisms, and this amount of pollutant is growing, is accumulating in this organism. So it's especially problematic for the higher apex predators, and they are mostly intoxicated by such substances like DDT. And right now, DDT is used only in some problematic areas where we have malaria. DDT is still used in such places, but majority of the world is banned. Yeah, so it's not as big problem as let's say 50 years ago, but still it's it's present in the atmosphere, in the environment. And we also have obviously different pops, not only DDT is the problem. And similar problem is with heavy metals. So they accumulate in organisms and damage, for example, nervous systems. And most problematic are lead and mercury. And long time ago, lead was added to the petrols, and it was advertised as something good for our cars. Yeah, so petrol with lead is good for your car. Yeah, and that's true. In fact, the car machines works better with if the petrol contains lead, but lead is toxic for environment, and there is a huge problem with lead in the environment. So they banned to they prohibited to use lead in petrols. And also mercury is a big problem, and why we have mercury in the environment. So similarly, like with sulfur, coal always contains some elements that are so if we use coal in our plants, it's not pure coal. It's always contains some small amounts of sulfur, some small amounts of nitrogen, and also mercury. So if we burn coal, mercury is emitted to the atmosphere, then it's deposited in rain and snow. And with rain and snow, it goes to the environment, to the lakes, and then this mercury is, let's say, in lakes. Fishes live in such lakes and accumulate this mercury, and then we eat such fishes. Yeah, so that's the problem with these heavy metals. They accumulate in environment. And problem in polar regions is also with chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, so-called. And it was once commonly used in refrigerators and aerosols. And why they are problematic? Because they are responsible for ozone depletion. You probably heard about ozone hole. So ozone depletion in stratosphere. And a little bit more in next slides about that. And also one of major pollutants is also ozone, and it's secondary pollutant, so it means that it's not created directly, but usually created with the participation of sunlight, and it's produced with the presence of other pollutants like nitrogen. So ozone in stratosphere is good. Yeah, so 30 kilometers above our heads, we have pretty much, quite a lot of ozone, and that ozone is really helpful for us because it blocks harmful harmful ultraviolet emitted by sun. And but there is also an ozone that is near the ground, that is produced by, for example, by the car activity and the sun, obviously with the sun, when the sun is present, because it's a secondary pollutant. And such ozone is very harmful. It's a oxidant that it's damage our skin, damage our lungs, and so on. So it's very very toxic gas. And in case, so right now we know about the major pollutants that are problematic in polar areas, not only in polar areas, obviously. And in case of, if we compare Arctic and Antarctic, we can say that Antarctic air is almost untouched by anthropogenic pollution. Yeah? So Antarctic air is really clean. And but we cannot say something like that in for the Arctic. So in the Arctic, pollution locally can be significant and higher than anywhere else. So why is that? Because, for example, in Antarctic we don't have wildfires. Yeah, the Antarctic, there is no forests, almost no tundra. We have only glaciers there, almost. So there, one big source of pollutants is is not present in Antarctic, and in Arctic we have quite a lot of wildfires. That's one problem, and obviously the human activity in the Arctic is much bigger than in the Antarctic. And in case of let's say about some toxic hotspots in the Arctic. So there are areas in the Arctic that are really heavily polluted, and one of the biggest polluted cities in the world is Norilsk. And Norilsk is a city above Arctic Circle, which is the largest sulfur dioxide emitter in the world. So 1% of all global emission of sulfur dioxide is coming from that city, from that Norilsk city. So it's absolutely incredible amount of sulfur dioxide. And sulfur dioxide is responsible for acid rains. And not only in Norilsk area, but this sulfur dioxide is transported on huge distances. So, for example, during my dissertation, during my PhD, I studied the snow cover in the Svalbard area, so 1,000 kilometers, more than 1,000 kilometers from Norilsk area, and we found a lot of sulfur dioxide, so acid snowfalls in Svalbard. And when we tracked back the air that was responsible for this pollution, for this acid snowfalls, we discovered that this air came from the Norilsk area. So it's not only a local problem; it's really, this city pollutes majority of the Arctic. And Norilsk city is the most polluted city of Russia, and this in 7 in the world. Yes, this 7 in the world is obviously, let's say, not okay. It's changed from year to year. Yeah, so on once it's on 7th place in the world, and in the other year it's not as bad, but still it's one of the most polluted cities in the world. And in Norilsk, inhabitants live 10 years shortened compared to the Russian average. So it's it's huge. The air pollution there is really huge, and it's really toxic place to live. And Norwich City is the northernmost city with more than 100,000 of inhabitants. So in fact, it's some approximately 180,000 inhabitants. So quite a lot, like for the Arctic area. And here we have some pictures from Norwich, and as you can see, it's not a pretty place. And it's not only problematic for the air pollutants in the matter of air pollution, but also we have a lot of oil spills there. So it's not only a problem for the air, but also for the soil, for the water, because we have some heavy industry that pollutes also the soils, for example. And other very polluted area in the polar zone is Murmansk. And Murmansk is the largest city above Arctic Circle with the 300,000 inhabitants. And in Murmansk region, we have metallurgical industry, so high soot and sulfur monoxide dioxide emissions. And in close neighborhood of that city is a lot of other smaller cities like Nickel, Monchegorsk, and others. So that part of Europe, so area of the Murmansk city is really heavily polluted. And here we have the Murmansk city, also not very pretty place to live. Yeah. And moving from Russia, because not only Russia is a major polluter of the Arctic. We also have huge pollution coming from Alaska, and we have something, some city, let's say city, on Alaska that is called Prathoe Bay, and it's one of the largest oil fields in the world. And together with oil extraction, we have also emission of many toxic gases like carbon monoxide, nitrogen monoxide, dioxide, and so on. And pollutants from that place, from Prathoe Bay, often are transported on huge distances. And for example, on Barrowtown, that is 300 kilometers from Prathoe Bay, we often have very polluted air. But in Barrow, there is no huge emissions. Yeah? So it should be clean city. But as the 300 kilometers away is Prathoe Bay, they often have really bad air. So it's also not local source, but also intoxicate huge part of the Arctic. And similarly, like in Norilsk, the Prathoe Bay is responsible not only for the contamination of air, but also we have frequent oil spills, and one of the biggest oil spills happened in that place, yeah, in Alaska, in the Prathoe Bay area. Largest was in 2006. Here we have some picture from Prathoe Bay. As you can see, if you see something like that, you can be sure that the air is not very healthy. And going back to Russia, but with this completely different pollutant, we have Novaya Zemlya archipelago, and that was the nuclear test zone and radioactive waste storage site. And that was the place where the largest nuclear bomb was detonated. It was Tsar bomb in 1961. And on that polygon, more than 100 nuclear tests were carried out, and the last one was in 1919. And obviously, you probably know that nuclear waste are not so easily depleted from the environment. So the problem is still present there. So the radioactive pollution is still quite huge there. And right now in Novaya Zemlya there is only military activities, and there is no industry there. But lead and zinc mines are planned to open. So if they will be open, they will be one of the northernmost mines of lead and zinc, and obviously they will have huge influence on the polar air. And here we have some picture from Novaya Zemlya, some waste storage, waste site. So as you can see, it's not very clean there. And as I said before, it's quite expensive to move rubbish from the such isolated places. So they are store this waste there. And obviously it's not very healthy for humans and also for animals. As you can see, polar bears are feeding on such waste sites. And okay, I told you about the most polluted places, let's say Arctic hot toxic places, but obviously we have a lot more places where the air can be very unhealthy, and there is something called Arctic haze. So it's a Arctic version of smog, and this Arctic haze can be spotted almost everywhere in the Arctic. It's even on remote and uninhabited places in the Arctic. We can spot such Arctic haze, and it occurs periodically during the spring with anticyclonic weather. And why we have this Arctic haze? Because we have huge wildfires in Alaska or Siberia regions mainly, and these pollutants that are emitted during these wildfires are transported on big distances, and we can, for example, have heavy air pollution on, for example, Svalbard. Here we have pictures from New Alesund on Svalbard archipelago, and this is how normally it looks like. So the air is clean, but we didn't have any factories, any mines here right now, so the air should be clean. But as the wildfires transport emits a lot of pollutants and they are transported on huge distances, we can have air like that in New Alesund. So this is an Arctic case. In New Alesund, so in place that should be completely clean, but it's not. It's sometimes during the spring the air looks like that. And quickly about air pollution effects. So one of the effects of air pollutants is ozone hole, and this is the problem during the spring in polar regions, especially above Antarctica. In Arctic is also present, but not it's not so bad as in Antarctica. And ozone hole is caused by CFCs, so these chlorofluorocarbons. And this depletion, ozone hole depletion, can be also large after volcano eruptions. Yeah, so volcanoes also produce a lot of substances that deplete the ozone layer. And in 1987, the CFCs were banned in so-called Montreal Protocol. And from that time, there is a slow regeneration of ozone layer. And right now it's much better than let's say 30 years ago or 20 years ago. But this ozone hole is regenerates really slowly, and it probably if everything will go well, it will last until 2065. Yeah, so more than 40 years to regenerate the ozone layer. But right now it's much better than years before. And yeah, climate warming, I mentioned that before. So Arctic temperatures rise twice or even triple as fast as in mid latitudes. And that's the problem mostly for the animals. We observe species migration. So we spot more often thermophilic animals in the Arctic, and those animals that are addicted to cold, let's say, they are endangered. Yeah, so there's a problem mostly for animals like polar bears. And climate warming is also dangerous because other reasons, for example, release of bacteria frozen in ice or permafrost, and that's not a science fiction. It's happening right now. So, for example, we can hear something sometimes in the news that let's say anthrax bacteria are released from the permafrost, and they kill these bacteria killed, for example, thousands of reindeers or something like that. That happens right now. And there is also a problem because we have sea level rise. So with the Arctic melting, when Arctic ice is melting, we observe sea level rises, and that's the problem in our latitudes too. And obviously, there are some loops. So if we have climate warming, we have more frequent wildfires, and if we have more wildfires, we have further increase in pollution. Yeah, so that's the loop. That's really bad for the polar area. And obviously, these toxic gases are not unhealthy only for people, but also for other organisms. For example, intoxicated animals have lower reproductive success, especially those that are contaminated with heavy metals or persistent organic pollutants. So these gases disorders the immune, nervous, endocrine, respiratory systems, and so on. And ozone hole increases the risk of skin cancer in animals as well. So it's not a problem only for humans, but also animals can have skin cancer, yeah, due to the ozone hole. So it's a big problem. And also with climate warming, we have, for example, tundra damages due to frosts, because if we have climate warming, there is less and less snow cover, but still the weather could be quite cold. So if we have cold and no snow cover, the plants are really damaged due to frosts. And on the end, I can say how you can ask how to fight air pollution. So in fact, it's not very you cannot do much, yeah, but still you have some influence on the air pollution, especially in local area. So we can obviously install some devices that clean our air, but they work only on small areas. They are mostly for used indoors, yeah, in our rooms, in our flats. But we can also clean, let's say, some small parts of the cities with such devices. And obviously, if you choose the bike, then rather than car, you won't emit the carbon dioxide, the nitrogen dioxide, and so on. So the air will be cleaner. And for example, if you won't eat meat every day, the methane emissions will probably drop. But you know, it's not one person cannot act too much. So the most important is to influence our governments and maybe choose the parties who are more green. They want to use alternative energy sources and so on. And that's the something that we can influence in case of air pollution. But one person cannot do much. But if we influence governments, maybe that will help in longer period of time. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Watch other recordings from webinars on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/EduArctic. EduArctic 2. From polar research to scientific passion, innovative nature education in Poland and Norway receives a grant of 240,000 euros received from Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway under EEA funds.